beginning in verse 1 of Mark chapter 8. It says, "In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat." It says now in verse 3, it says, "If I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar." Some of you may have come from afar tonight. And it says in verse 4, Mark chapter 8, "Then the disciples answered him and said, How can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness?" And he asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus just fed the 5,000 just in Mark chapter 6. It was recorded. And here we see a replay of the situation. And the disciples are like, well, how are we going to feed them? Have you ever been in a place where the Lord does this mighty work, knocks your socks off, so to speak, and you're like, wow, God, this is amazing. You're the almighty God. You always take care of me. And then a week later, you're like, God, what are we going to do here, Lord? I don't know what's going to happen. Well, he says, what are we going to do? Well, he gives them the answer here in just a moment. He asked and said, "How many loaves do you have?" in verse 5. And they said 7. Remember, it used to be 5 loaves and 2 fish back in Mark chapter 6. Here they have 7 loaves. And so he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks, broke them and gave them to his disciples and set before them. And they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he set them also before them. And so they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. So not only are the disciples revisiting this miraculous type of provision from God, they're actually getting blessed. Well, when we looked at the 5 loaves and 2 fish in Mark chapter 6, it says that each of the disciples received a basket. It would be the word that we would use for like a satchel, a man bag, so to speak, to stuff things in. Each of the disciples from the 5 loaves, each received their own satchel of fish and then and bread. And then this time around, when Jesus is feeding the 4,000, we see 7 baskets taken up of leftover food. This isn't a satchel. It's actually the word basket there in the Greek is the same word used in Acts chapter 9 when they were going to lower Paul over the side of the wall in a basket. This basket was large enough to fit a person in. This was a huge basket. Okay, not the satchel. This was a huge basket of leftovers. And again, the Lord miraculously provides for those who were in need. And it says, now those who had eaten in verse 9 of Mark 8 were about 4,000. And he sent them away and immediately got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha.